I recorded myself for 5 consecutive nights. Each night, my body rose between 3 and 4 in the morning, opened the window, and spoke. I remembered nothing upon waking, only the red fingertips and a dryness in my throat that no amount of water could relieve. But the recorder captured everything. 5 nights. 5 sessions. A total of 116 minutes of continuous speech in a language my waking self could not reproduce. I had a corpus. A linguist with an unknown corpus is like a geologist with a new rock. The procedure is clear. Segment. Classify. Search for patterns. Formulate hypotheses. Verify. I spent 3 days shut inside the guest house, headphones on, the analysis software open, and a notebook where I jotted down everything I found. I did not eat properly. I did not sleep, or I slept only to speak in my sleep and produce more material. Garazi brought omelets and apples and left them at the door without knocking, as if she knew that what I was doing required not being interrupted. What I found forced me to rethink everything I knew about linguistics. First finding: the language had at least 63 distinct phonemes. Spanish has 24. English, 44. Only a few languages from the Caucasus or Southeast Asia approach 60. But several of the Okhotsk's phonemes did not exist in any known language, sounds requiring articulations that human anatomy should not be able to produce. Consonants that vibrated simultaneously at 2 points in the vocal tract. Vowels that changed quality mid-emission without transition. Subglottal sounds that resonated in the chest, not the throat. Second finding: the grammar was alien. It was not agglutinative like Basque, nor inflectional like Latin, nor analytic like Chinese. It contained grammatical categories that exist in no human language. I found what appeared to be verbal conjugations, but they did not mark person and tense as ours do. They marked direction up, down, inward, outward. They marked state asleep, awake, in transition. And they marked degree of containment: free, bound, dissolved. As though the language had been designed to describe something that moves between sleep and waking, between depth and surface. Third finding, the one that broke me: the language was not natural. Human languages evolve. They transform with use, they simplify, they grow complex, they acquire borrowings from other languages, they lose sounds they no longer need. That process leaves marks, irregularities, exceptions, redundancies. All human languages have them. They are the scars of use. The Okhotsk had none. It was perfectly regular. Every rule applied without exception. Every pattern repeated with mathematical precision. There were no irregularities because there was no history. The language had not evolved. It had been designed, constructed, like an instrument, like a tool created for a specific function. It was not a language for communicating between humans. It was a language for communicating with something that was not human. I brought my findings to Landa. We sat in his flat, surrounded by his maps and his filing cabinets and his whiteboard of notes that this time he did not bother to cover. I explained the discoveries, the impossible phonemes, the grammar of direction and containment, the absence of evolution. I showed him the spectrograms. I played him the recordings. Landa listened attentively. He nodded in the appropriate places. He asked the right questions, intelligent questions, informed ones, revealing a knowledge of phonetics and computational linguistics that an ethnographer should not possess. And when I finished, when I expected astonishment, or incredulity, or at the very least the healthy bewilderment of any scientist confronted with data that contradicts everything known, Landa said, "It confirms what I thought." He did not say confirms what I suspected. He said what I thought, as though my 3 days of frantic analysis had been a verification of something he already knew. "How long have you been studying this?" I asked. 5 years. since I found the Sulasar transcription in Logrono. That transcription has errors. A 17th century inquisitor couldn't represent these phonemes. No. But he could represent enough for someone with the right knowledge to recognize what he was dealing with. I asked directly, "Did you know it wasn't a human language before I arrived?" Landa looked at me with something that could have been respect or could have been calculation. With Landa, the two things looked too similar. I suspected it was pre-human, yes. I didn't have the tools to confirm it. You did. Is that why I'm here? You're here because the university sent you. And who suggested to the university that they send someone to Zugaramurdi? Silence. Landa stood up, went to the kitchen, came back with 2 whiskies, gave me one. He did not answer the question. What he did say, while I drank and processed the enormity of what my own data was telling me, was this. Do you know what the biggest implication of your discovery is? It's not that a non-human language exists. It's that someone speaks it. 3 old women in a Navarrese Pirian village speak a language that was designed before human beings existed. Which means someone taught it to them. Or something inside them remembers it. I drank the whiskey. It burned my throat. But less than the implication of what Landa had just said. Ain disappeared the following day. She did not show up for the appointment we had arranged. It was to be our first long conversation, the first time she had agreed to speak to me about the language without restrictions. I waited an hour at her farmhouse. The door was locked. The sheep in the pen were restless, without water. Ain never left her sheep without water. I went to Miran. Miran did not know where she was. I went to Conchi. Conchi was sitting in her kitchen, motionless, her hands on the table, staring at the wall. She was not peeling chestnuts. She was not doing anything. She was simply there, with the stillness of a stone, and when I asked about Ain, she looked at me with an expression that was not worry but certainty. She's gone to Beroscobero, she said. Alone. The way she said alone with the same intonation a doctor uses for metastasis froze my blood. We climbed to the meadow. Miran, Conchi, Jones, and I. Conchi walked faster than all of us, with an energy her 82-year-old body should not have possessed, as though fear had stripped 30 years from her. We found Ain at the edge of the meadow, seated on the threshold between the trees and the grass, trembling. Not from cold, the cold was the same as every day, and Ain was dressed for the mountain. She trembled from within, like an instrument someone has struck too hard and that cannot stop vibrating. Conchi knelt beside her. She spoke to her in Basque, fast, low. Ain replied in broken fragments. Not in Basque. In the language. In the Ahotsak. Scraps of sentences that left her mouth like sobs, not because she was crying but because the words shook her physically, like electric shocks. Conchi grabbed her by the shoulders. Shook her. Spoke with a fury I had not seen in her, a fury that was pure terror disguised as rage. Hairu Ahots. Betty Hairu. Batek Ezidu Edukitsen Batek Dietsen Du. 3 voices. Always 3. One alone does not contain one alone calls. Ain stopped trembling. She looked at Conchi with the eyes of someone who has just woken from a nightmare. Or of someone who has just woken inside one. Something is changing below, she said in Spanish, in a voice that was not entirely her own. I felt it. It's moving faster. I needed to tell it we're still here. That we haven't gone. With all 3. Conchi shouted. Only with all 3. Miran looked at me. I saw in her eyes the same thing I was thinking. One voice does not contain. One voice calls. Ain had not gone to calm the presence. Ain had woken it a little more. We descended to the village in silence. Ain walked between Miran and Conchi, leaning on both of them like someone who has lost all sense of balance. Jones brought up the rear. He did not look at me once. I had the recorder in my pocket. running. That night there was no need for me to rise in my sleep. The murmur began earlier, at 11. Not at 3:17, at 11 o'clock at night. Louder than ever. No longer a subterranean whisper, but a vibration that set the glasses on the shelf tinkling and the ceiling beams creaking. I sat up in bed. I listened. I did not need the recorder or the headphones or the analysis software. I understood. Without translating, without analyzing, without intermediaries. The ahotsak flowed directly from my ear to my comprehension, bypassing all the layers of linguistic processing the human mind normally requires to convert sound into meaning. I understood it the way one understands a mother tongue, without effort, without delay, with the immediacy of something that is not a code but an extension of thought. And what it said was simple. 2 words. Repeated with the infinite patience of something that does not know time. The first meant something between ready and ripe and prepared a conjugation indicating that a process was approaching its point of completion, that something asleep was in transition toward waking, that the containment was weakening. The second was a temporal adverb that exists in no human language. It did not mean now or soon or tomorrow. It meant something closer to at the moment the last barrier yields. An adverb that measured time not in minutes or days but in degrees of resistance. Together, the 2 words meant something that my mind translated, with a precision that terrified me, as almost. I got up. I went to the window. I shut it. I locked it. I drew the curtain. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and covered my ears with my hands. It was no use. The language did not enter through the ears. It entered through the bones, through the skin, through the very earth upon which the house was built. Almost. And I knew with the certainty of someone hearing their diagnosis from a doctor's mouth that what Ain had done in the meadow could not be undone. That the presence had shifted. That the maintenance sequence the keepers had not recited in time would no longer suffice to return it to deep sleep. That time was running out. And that I, the linguist who had come to document a dialect, was now part of the problem. Because every night my mouth spoke the sleeping language, every word my vocal cords shaped without my permission, was another invitation. Another reminder. Another I am here, addressed to something that had been waiting centuries for someone to answer. The language was inside me, and the language did not want to be studied. It wanted to be spoken.